A few items before we start our January workshop. These have to do with some important folks within our school community who we have lost in the past few weeks. I just want to say a few words about these people because of the significance and impact that they've had over time with the district. We lost John Malsney. It was New Year's Eve. John was 72. John was our solicitor for the school district, and to the best of our understanding, he was our solicitor for at least 38 years, which is absolutely amazing. There wasn't anybody around who could really not just figure out exactly how many years he put in. It was at least 38 years, maybe more. John also served as a solicitor for the Twin Valley School District and the Conrad Weiser School Districts. He just retired just a few years ago, and that's when we brought on Sweets, Stevens, Katzen, Williams. He's a graduate from Exeter, graduated in '64, and he was one of these guys who excelled at everything he did. He was great in athletically as well as academically, and held actually a few athletic records in the course of his time here at Exeter. John was also class president, National Honor Society member, student council, went to Yale University after graduating from Exeter in 1964, and then went on to law school and went right into ed law. So he was really strong and well respected for his work in education law and municipal law. And we knew John, I think, as somebody who was thoughtful, very knowledgeable, but also modest, and a very sincere man who I think held the highest level of integrity. Also, we want to acknowledge the loss of Dr. Chris Ganis, who was 86 years old and passed away on January 3rd. Dr. Ganis was on the school board for a 10-year period of time, from like 83 until, or 84 until 93. He was the vice president of the board. He served several years as president of the board. And then he went on also to be a supervisor, a township supervisor, and was very instrumental in bringing the Exeter Commons Shopping Center to the area in 2007, and also the purchase of the Reading Country Club by the township in 2005, both of those under his tenure as chair of the Board of Supervisors. Graduate of Reading High School, Albright grad, went to University of Pittsburgh and became a dentist in Reading and maintained a practice for 33 years. So we wanted to recognize the significant contribution that both of these gentlemen have made. We want to commemorate their memories and their service to their community, and if you would please just join me in a moment of silence for these two fine men. Thank you. I don't know if anyone else had any comments about John or Dr. Ganis. I know some of us were here when John was here. We've got several new board members, but I know Mike, you and Pat were both here when John served as solicitor, and I thought we saw our solicitor on a more regular basis at that time, and it was really great to have John.
Yeah, I was on the board too.
Oh, you were too. That's right. Sorry.
Yeah, I just, he had a beautiful memorial service on Saturday, and Dr. Phillips and Dr. Hemberger were there along with myself and Mr. Brady and a couple of other folks, Mr. Diesinger and Mr. Quinter. I didn't realize that Mr. Quinter was his friend since they were 7 years old, so he was quite emotional. But a real accomplished person, I didn't realize he was a Yale University graduate. Rest in peace, John, and I think Dr. Ganis, the services are tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Yeah. Another order of business, wanted to acknowledge a board resignation. We heard from last evening from Mrs. Hacker, Jasmine Hacker, who indicated that she would be resigning from her position as school director effective immediately. I'll just indicate what she said here. My commitments have become too great for me to be able to fulfill the requirements of my position on the board. It's been an honor to serve on the Exeter Township School Board and advocating student success. My motives have always been to support Exeter Township School District's growth while listening and caring about the taxpayers. I think we deeply regret her decision, but certainly understand the reasons why with a growing family and her commitments to work. And I know that the high standard that she holds for herself, it's very difficult to manage all of these things. It certainly wasn't anything. I spoke to her this morning, and it certainly wasn't anything with her dissatisfaction with her fellow board members or with what was going on in the district. She simply, it was more of a personal decision that she had to take that, make that decision. So we'll be taking action on this item at the voting meeting next Tuesday. So this time, this is our workshop meeting, so an opportunity for an active engagement on the items that are on the agenda. These are all items that will be subject to our voting meeting next Tuesday, and I would invite your discussion, your comments, board members, as we go through these agenda items. First, we're going to start with public comments. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience, whether staff member, member of the community, whomever, to speak to any items on the agenda or anything else that might be in the best interest of the school district at this time. Okay. Well, then, seeing none, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Campbell, our high school principal. I understand you have a program report and maybe a few other things this evening.
Go on. Turn it off. They're all awake now.
That's the plan.
Good evening. Thank you for having me out tonight. It's my honor to introduce a few students who we're very proud of at the high school. I'm going to ask Sid Mabraju and Sam Swestock to come forward. Sid is our only National Merit Scholarship semifinalist. His goal is to become a neurosurgeon. He's a member of the Exeter water polo, swimming, and tennis teams. He's a Leo Club vice president, Boy Scout senior patrol leader. He's also involved with Science Olympiad, TSA, Environmental Club, and has volunteered at both Reading and St. Joe's hospitals. Sid is incredibly intelligent and has natural leadership abilities. Sam Swestock is a National Merit Scholarship commended student. He's interested in majoring in aeronautical and mechanical engineering. He's active in his Boy Scouts and has achieved Eagle Scout. Sam is a musician and plays and composes music for bass, the guitar, and ukulele. Sam is also a Rensselaer Medal recipient. He's a highly competitive scholarship for Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. We're very proud of both these young men. Michelle Wong is also a National Merit Scholarship commended student. She's unable to join us tonight. Her aspirations are in engineering, physics, and political science, some diversity that's reflective of her skills. She's also involved in TSA and Science Olympiad. She's also active in the Reading Symphony Youth Orchestra, Spanish Club, Chamber Orchestra, and PMEA, District and Region Orchestras. So very talented students, very proud of them, very proud of their accomplishments, and representatives of Exeter. So thank you very much for both.
Before you gentlemen leave, are you both seniors? Yeah. You're both seniors? And I'm not sure if I wasn't hearing all that well. What are your plans for beyond high school? Maybe you guys could just let us say.
Yeah, I I'm going to dual major aeronautical and mechanical engineering.
And I plan to join, do pre-med, and then hopefully eventually become a neurosurgeon.
I just wanted to say quick that both Sid and Sam were little guys in Troop 377 when I was an older guy phasing out. And Sam, you've gotten your Eagle Scout, and Sid, you're a Life Scout, right? You're almost there. All right, well, I'll be looking to come to your Court of Honor too, but these guys are really now mainstays of the troop, and a lot of the younger guys really look up to you guys, and I kind of know what that was like when I was your age, so it's really cool that you guys are getting ready for this great experience, and you're doing academically a lot better than I did, so the future is bright.
I would just like to congratulate you gentlemen. Sid, thanks for volunteering at St. Joe's. We have a lot of dedicated volunteers. I'm glad you're becoming a neurosurgeon, which you won't find much business at this table, but you know, you will as you get out.
Speak for yourself.
Congratulations. You've got a libertarian brain there. The other side of your feet. Please bring your magnifying glass.
Ow!
Wow. I'm not even going to defend you because you deserved it.
Do any of you know where you're going to go to school?
Not yet.
Not yet. You just look for looking. Where would you like to go?
I hope to go to Cornell. That's probably my #1 school.
I hope to go to Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech. Oh, Georgia Tech. Oh, I understood Georgia Tech.
Thank you.
I also just want to quickly thank Sid and Sam's families for coming out tonight. We appreciate your support of them this evening, but more importantly, over the last 12 years, we know that you're an important partner in all that we do, and their success wouldn't be without you. I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about some of the school performance at the high school. And I have shared with you this document. This contains some of the same graphics and some of the same data that I've been trying to begin conversations with, or have been beginning conversations with teachers of the high school as we start to reflect on our performance. Many of these screenshots are straight off of the Future Ready PA Index, and we used these in a faculty meeting just the other day. This is really just the surface what's in there. There's more in the PA Future Ready Index, and there's also quite a bit more that's not publicly available. But if you've not spent time with that, I would encourage you to do so. It's public and it's new, so there's some, I think, improvements from this over previous SVP reports. There's also some things about it that I don't completely agree with how it's presented, but I'll touch base on those. What I think is really important to understand is that we want to use this information as a way to drive conversations in the high school about how we're doing. And we've started some of that and started to understand a few things on the surface and then want to go deeper. And I want to just share a couple of questions I'm using and will continue to use with the high school when we look at this data, and really it starts with what does this data measure? What do these scores reflect our own assessment of our students' learning? And if they don't, how do we reconcile that? What does this look like in my classroom? Because although this is a lot of a 30,000-foot view, we want individual teachers to come back to their classrooms and say, what can I do with this? What does this look like in my classroom? And then what do I need to know about these measures or about my students to figure out what to do next? And the real purpose there is we wanted to keep this future focused. Understand it, but then what do we do with it? So just really quickly, these really get into two areas. One is achievement, one is growth. And you can see that it breaks into the three keystone tested areas of literature, algebra, and biology. And the first area looks at achievement. And I won't go into all the numbers, I know you can do that, but I want to just highlight a couple of the notes that I put on there. Specifically, when you take a look at the statewide averages, I added that in red, the Ks. That's the statewide average for keystone scores. For whatever reason, the state's chosen to take statewide averages and look at PSSAs through keystones. So those are very different tests and they're very different averages, but they've averaged them all together. I don't think that's a really great comparison, so I put the keystone scores in there as well. Moving on to the next page, you look at achievement. You can see some more longitudinal data over the last couple of years of how we've been achieving in those three areas. But then at the bottom, we're also looking to see how we can push students toward the top. and that's the percentage of kids who scored advanced on those scores. That is also something that is measured in, I think that's one of the ESSA measurements. Shifting to the growth measures, that's really taking a look at how students scored compared to how they were projected to score. And what the state's done is put that on a 50 to 100 point scale. I don't think that that's terribly useful unless you can take a look at how they were projected to score or scored compared to how they were projected to on the last page, where you take a look at, and if you could scroll down to the very last page. So I think this is a more useful tool, and this is not what's in the dashboard when you go online, but it does represent how our students did in the different test levels, so below basic, basic, proficient, advanced. What you see there is how the students were projected to score, and then how they did score in each of those areas. And if you look at the number for each of those levels, it shows the number of students who are in each of those categories. It takes a little time to interpret, but I think it's worth spending time with. When we looked at this as a building, what we really realized is that we're doing many things well in algebra and biology. We want to continue that. We also discovered there's some things below the surface that we want to watch. Literature stands out as a challenge, and I got to give credit to Julie Klein and the department leaders for jumping on that as soon as this was revealed to us in November. Some meetings have been set up in some other districts, and we're meeting with teachers and department leaders in other districts who have figured out how they face these challenges, and we want to try to understand the root cause. I can't tell you that I understand the root cause of some of that right now, and I'm looking forward to working with the department leaders as we try to analyze that to understand where we're missing the mark on the literature. But I'm glad that we've got the information in front of us and can move forward with it. Questions?
So when they say basic, is that and proficient, is proficient to where they should be and basic is below that?
That's the goal, and then that's in terms of achievement. I think it's important to point out that growth is actually a little more highly valued by some people, and I'm very pleased when we see a kid who is projected to be basic but is able to score up in proficient, or a kid that's below basic and is able to move up to basic. That's the sort of thing that we really want to look at as we get more personalized in our approach to kids. But the goal is proficient.
So what role does Mrs. Klein play in this scenario now to, get the literature up to proficient?
Well, I think it's something that we all, I really want this to be a conversation that teachers, administrators, Mrs. Klein really are all part of understanding and sorting out solutions to. But she's been very helpful in terms of reaching out to other districts to start to understand that. She spent some time, and really, if you want to speak to that, because I know what you've done, you know it better.
Back down, I didn't even see you, Julie.
I know, that's too easy when you're 5 feet tall, that's why I always wear heels.
I'm sorry.
So that's a really good question, because we all own the data. When any of the scores come in, we all own the data. That's a matter of what are we doing about that as we look at these scores. So, things that have been done collectively over the years is really pushing writing across the curriculum is what we have done across K through 12. Along with that, the curriculum has been worked on at the 7, 8, 9, 10 level. We have purchased new resources also over the course of the past number of years. So now really it's backtracking some of that and even utilizing more readily some of the released items and things that the state has released, some of the exemplars that are put out there, and really building the stamina of the students, because when you look at a Keystone exam, it's in 2 modules. There is, and this is not an excuse, this is just a reality for our students, there's an inordinate amount of reading. There are 4 passages in the first module, which is fiction. There are 4 passages in the second module, which is nonfiction, and then all of the questions that go with that. And with every reading passage that a student is reading, they also have an open-ended response item of analysis that they have to do. So we have a lot of work to do to dig in more deeply to make sure that even though we've done the curriculum and it's aligned to the standards as we've written that during the course of the past 4 years, as we've purchased new materials that the board has supported and looking at that, but really looking at how we're building that reading stamina within the time in the classroom, and how we are aligning specifically the eligible content. And I honestly, as I've conversed with our department chairs, really at the 7, 8, and the 9 through 12 level, their curriculum, I believe, because I've overseen a lot of the curriculum in the district, is some of the strongest curriculum work. And I think that my colleagues would really shake their heads to that. However, I will tell you that one of the things that we have not done as a district in ELA, and that is truly, again, looking at those released items, infusing some of those released items in a very authentic way to what we're teaching. So we've taken a curriculum, we've written it for what we know we need to be teaching kids, to read, to write, to learn all of these literature terms and things, but we've not done a deep enough job of weaving exactly what that keystone looks like. The other piece that we haven't utilized is we've made a decision over the past previous 5 years or 4 years not to utilize the CDT. That's the classroom diagnostic tool. We've not used that in ELA because the step and the time in the district and our leadership, our role really was we don't want to just be focused on teaching to a test. Now we've kind of come full circle and said, whoa, okay, we're doing a good job teaching, but we're not doing a great job, really, of teaching more of the test and being more hyper-focused. This is why when Eric and the senior high leadership and I met to discuss this, one of the things that we discussed with Dr. Winters and Dr. Phillips is we need to be reaching out to some of our more high-performing districts, some of whom are in the county and others who are not in the county. We just went to the SAS conference. And we sat in, Dr. Phillips and I sat in with a team from Northeastern School District, and we were really wowed by what one of their ELA teachers was doing, their Keystone scores being in the dark blue. We have a visit scheduled with them on February 12th to go and visit Nancy Gajewski, who's our department chair. Hillary Arndt is also traveling with us. We're also going to a couple other school districts in the county. We know what some of the work is here that we have to do. And some of that, to tell you the truth, I think is more teaching to the test than we've ever had to do in this district in ELA, to be very honest with you. To get kids to, our curriculum's rigorous. Don't be fooled by that and say our curriculum's not rigorous. Our curriculum is rigorous. It's just we're not aligning, we're aligning, but we're not teaching to the test so much. And I think our kids need more exposure to exactly what the keystone looks like because it is very time consuming and it's lengthy for the kids. And they kind of, a lot of them just kind of go, I don't want to do it, to be very honest with you. So I hope that answers your question, Pat. So how I fit in on that, we have a lot more curriculum work to do, but some of it's going to start with visits because we want to see and we want to ask very specifically. We have some specific questions to be asking these other districts, like a Wilson School District. Wilson School District has good Keystone scores. Their SPP scores, not so hot, depending, okay? And so there's just a lot of different factors in this. So that's what we're working on. Other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, we have another presentation this evening. It's not on the agenda, but Mrs. Guy, she's going to walk us through the 2019-20 preliminary general fund budget.
Oh, wow. Oh, we got our wireless. That's awesome.
Nice.
Look like my pastor.
Moving into the technology.
Coming into the 20th century. That was impressive.
The reason why I'm doing an update, the board has to do one of two things. And I'll the timeline. Adopt a preliminary budget which would be in February 19, or adopt a resolution to, it's called an opt-out resolution, to stay within the index. The index is the rate that you could raise taxes. Our index is 3%, but I'll try to explain and show you with some information why I would recommend that the board adopt a preliminary budget and go through that process. It does not mean that taxes will be raised or take advantage of all exceptions. It just provides flexibility going forward. I pointed out 3 weeks ago that by adopting a preliminary budget, it provides flexibility during the whole process as we go through June, because there's so many unknown variables. What the state's going to give us, what our underfunded and unfunded mandates could be imposed, or what we're currently experiencing. So that's probably the most important reason that the board adopt a preliminary budget. Last year, the board adopted the opt-out resolution. We did not qualify for any exceptions. So there really was no point to adopting a preliminary budget. But this year, there is a point to it. This slide explains the opt-out resolution. I think it's important with a preliminary budget that you have as much information as you need to make a decision to do the preliminary budget. And, you know, I'll be sharing more information with you through the next few slides. Again, the exceptions, referendum exceptions. 3 weeks ago, I had presented that my estimate, we would qualify for over 700,000 in special education exceptions. Basically, it looks at annual financial report for 17-18 compared to 16-17, and if your rate of growth after your reimbursement from the state for special education is higher than that index, then you apply for an exception. Retirement, my estimate 3 weeks ago was that we would qualify, but we do not. These state forms just were made available in early January on the state's website. So right now we qualify for special ed exception. We do not qualify for school construction grandfathered debt. So what does that do to our village? A 3% increase would bring it up to 33.6 approximately, or almost a mill. A mill's worth about, 1.375 million. Now the index, the exception, that would generate an additional 688,000 or another half mil. So the maximum would be 34.10 approximately, or a 4.53% increase. So to the index 3%, that exception would allow an additional half mil increase. I've looked at the revenue for this year, 18-19, and made some adjustments based upon 6 months of activity. And I'll just highlight some of the changes. Our investment income, I'm projecting that it'll be higher versus what I budgeted because rates have gone up, which is a good thing. Our delinquent and some other local revenue up 110,000, but our real estate tax, I'm estimating it's going to be 117,000 less than budgeted because there's a settlement on the agenda tonight, and we will be refunding, based upon the settlement, a large taxpayer, one of our largest taxpayers, that amount of money this year because of the settlement. I've also added the Act 44 Part A grant of $25,000. And in addition, our Medicaid access funding revenue stream is increasing. So those are the major areas, 368,000 more than originally budgeted. As far as the 1920, just some minor adjustments related to that real estate settlement that is on the agenda for review tonight. So pointing out again to you about the settlement. the total amount effective 7/1/2019 is a reduction of about $5.3 million. We also have a Walmart assessment, which their appeal we are intervening in. So we still are experiencing the impact of not only residential appeals, but commercial. So again, overall, this large taxpayer appeal that we have been looking at for quite some time, while it added almost $1 million to our tax revenue, when it, several years ago when it was reassessed, we have settled at losing about a third of that, almost $270,000. But that was all based upon appraisals and negotiations, and we believe we have a fair settlement here. But in any event, that does impact our assessed value. Looking at expenditures, I did not make any changes at this point. We've been looking at them, with the special ed department, and we still have a lot of things to review before I make any type of change. I have some areas of concern. But anyway, this revenue number really just reflects the $368,000 increase. So looking at a deficit of $1.7 million versus $2 million, which was originally adopted.
And when you say that you have areas of concern, is that related to you think some things are probably going to be reduced, or you think that these things won't change?
Areas of concern and expense that are trending higher than the budget,
Okay.
To the point where I have some concerns, will we be over budget in some areas? And then at that point, then we have to focus on staying within our overall budget figures, because you cannot exceed your adopted budget expenditure number unless you open up your budget. So we cannot exceed $76,709,000. So looking at the areas of concern, what we've experienced recently is an increase in out-of-district placements due to some students who have moved in and were placements, and the placement is going to continue, but other areas as well. So we're trying to look, special ed's looking at this in detail and trying to figure out, where our estimate is going to be for this year. So if you look at October, you get the enrollment numbers, 31, and December were at 42. So just focusing on, this is special education, contracted services, we budget $1 million, and we're already trending at a higher rate, because as of December, we really only have invoices through October and November. So we'll continue to review these numbers and really try to make sense of where are we going to end up by year end. Of course, things are always changing with students and their placements, but one thing that has really impacted us are students moving in to our district, and we were responsible, and we didn't budget for it. We really tried to have a tighter budget without much of a margin or variance, and I am concerned about that, and that's in the area of tuition as well. We have revised the numbers for 1920 and reflecting it in the numbers, which I'll show you in a couple slides. So really, next year, based upon our student placements right now, 1.6 million versus 1 million for this year, 1.8 million in tuition versus 1.6. So in my mind, we need to look at these closely and see where we need to, change our estimate or revision to the budget to cover these costs. Other areas that I have been looking at, wages and benefits. There are some favorable variances there, but we have some unbudgeted positions. 2 learning support teachers are needed, one at Moraine, one at Jacksonville to meet the caseloads, coordinator of personalized learning, and CSN that was approved. So these favorable variances will help offset that. Facility repair costs, Rob and I need to sit down and map out the remainder of the year. We've already spent 80% of our repair budget, and typically this time we're at about 60%. We had some major different repairs, but a lot of plumbing that took place. So
So are they unbudgeted? They're unbudgeted repairs? They're not capital repairs?
they're not it's an operating expense. It's not an improvement of any.
A lot of that due to the mold issues over the summer.
No, it was really just, well, I don't know whether you want to address it.
A lot, some of the remediation, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that was.
Right, those were in the numbers, yeah. Yeah, that was part of the numbers. So, basically I will continue to review. I did not feel comfortable changing our expenditure number or reducing anything, because again, I believe we are going to use a lot of the appropriations that are in the budget. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the two major changes in the preliminary budget were in the area of special ed IU services and immediate unit services and other professional contract services. And we also increased some tuition. So our total expense number for next year for the preliminary budget is $80,750,000, which is about a little over $500,000 more than I shared 3 weeks ago. So we are looking at an increase of expense of $4 million or 5.3%. The summary of revenue, expenditure, and fund balance, and again, reasons why to adopt a preliminary budget. This last column here shows increasing taxes to the max, or 4.53%, using the special ed exception, and we still are within the statutory limitation of keeping an an unassigned fund balance of less than 8%. This scenario would be the index. Our unassigned fund balance would be 5.48% with no tax increase. We have an unassigned fund balance of 2.2%. And for the preliminary budget, I would recommend keeping commitments at their current level of $2.6 million. These are amounts the board has authorized for specific purposes: PSERS, assessment appeals, and capital improvements. And finally, I drilled down in the detail of assignments, and these are future uses of fund balance, with the biggest being deficit. If we're having a deficit with no tax increase this year, next year, and this is an allowed use of an assignment or a legitimate use, we'll definitely have a deficit at some level. And as if tax increases were eliminated, obviously your deficit would go down. But other areas, pension, special education, these are areas where we are seeing significant increases. So at this point, January would be the deadline for the board to adopt the opt-out resolution to stay within the index. If you don't do that, then we will prepare a preliminary budget on the state's form showing that we could use exceptions and raise above the index. So I need to get a consensus among the board members here whether we want to continue with the preliminary budget. By no means does it mean that you'll be increasing taxes at that rate. It's a best practice. I mean, there's really a lot of work to be done. This year there was more staffing increases than I've seen in a few years, and the number of other budget impact forms, the resources that are being asked for, all the the licenses for curriculum materials. I think we're at a point where it's best practice to adopt a preliminary budget until we're able to go through the process and prioritize.
So Anna, those things that you just mentioned, are you looking at those as one-year anomalies, the textbooks, et cetera, et cetera?
Right, I did show, the non-payroll budget impact list, the last meeting. That was around $1 million. And some of those are 1 year, they have a 6-year period of, till it's renewed. But then the portions of that, well, what will be the request the following year? So, is it really a $5 million deficit? It's probably, around $4 million, if we assume all of those are one time. Your structural deficit is when your level of expenses just keeps increasing and increasing.
Are all of the cost savings through the lights, are they figured in?
They are. This year I budgeted $108,000 for that. And I'm currently monitoring it, and next year our rate, we procured a rate which is less than current year, so it's another $100,000 less. So yes, we are budgeting for that.
I keep these things. In 2013, you had given us something like this to see where everything was going, like a pie chart. And at that time, 15% of the budget was for special education. I think 40% was for normal education from K through 12. And 3% was for vocational education that they were, giving out to, I guess, where our kids go, or I don't know where they go, or the low tech, or all that. BCTC. Can you give us a chart next time so that we can see this and see if what the increases are? Are we, as far as special education, are we above the state level or are we below the state level? As right now, as far as the number of students and the percentage for the district.
When you say state level, those are a lot of factors. I mean, one of the things you saw is we have had about 12 move-ins this past month.
Special ed students?
Special ed students. They're out of district students that are moving in, and we're welcome to have them, and we'll do the best job we can with them. But they come with
a lot of money.
Well, yes, and you look at it both ways. There's a feeling of pride that people want to come here because they know we have a good program, but with that comes the cost. And again, as this guy just said, there's no way to really budget for that because it's a what if. What if people move in? But we could have one student move in and cost $250,000.
Well, what if they don't? There's the other side, right?
Well, that's the what if. So I'm not going to budget $250,000. So that's why if the numbers sway a little bit, we have overruns, and it's just the cost of doing business. I know that doesn't sound right to you guys, but people move in, and there's nothing, we can't say no.
I understand that. But isn't it like this, the big cities like Paris, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh, and cities that are larger than ours, don't they have?
Well, they have much more.
Much more?
Yes. So you also have to understand, too, the costs keep going up, and the state doesn't give any more. So what they've been giving to supplement costs, if not flat, has gone down over the years. The special ed costs is going up and up and up.
Well, I just saw the budget of Pennsylvania. They've had some really good numbers for the year. I mean, like $600 million more that they didn't expect. So I would hope that Governor Wolf would give that money to education and to special education.
Preliminarily, I saw something from the legislature that the educational advocates are down in Harrisburg asking for an additional $100 million for special education and an additional $400 million for the general education fund. I don't know where that's going to go. We'll see when that fits into the budget. But that is something they're looking for, and that would obviously help if we're getting more funding from the state.
Well, then I would suggest anybody.
But it's on the legislative committee like you are, Jerry, that you should call all our state and legislators and tell them they get with the program.
Yes, ma'am.
I will call them myself also.
Yeah, I've
But
been in touch.
remember, it's just states, not federal, because, you know.
Yeah. I've been in touch with them, and you know, a lot of them are saying they expect more funding.
I just say, you know, this area of special education, I'm going to say specifically out-of-district placements is a concern of mine. You know, this is one of those things that can really get out of hand with the school district. Very easy to place students out, very hard to get them back in. We know virtually every placement outside of the district can cost in excess of $25,000. Some cost well beyond that. You've looked at some of the contracts that we've approved over the past school year for some of these out-of-district placements. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon all of our supervisory personnel in special education to continue to examine every one of these placements annually. You know, when their IEPs are due, to attend the IEP meetings and to emphasize the importance of trying to return to the least restrictive environment, which is the home school, when they're ready, but also make sure that these are not programs that continue just based on the momentum of year to year, or based upon, let's say, a parent who's pushing for an out-of-district placement to continue just because there's a level of comfort with it. These are very expensive programs that only should be used in the most extreme cases possible, and I think too many times. And I'm not saying this is happening here, but I think it's easy for districts to latch into that, where it's very easy to kind of place kids, out of the district. To have an increase of 11 from October to December is highly unusual, and I can see where that in and of itself is having significant impact on our budget projections for next year. So that's an area I think we should really do everything we can to focus on and emphasize the importance of being extremely careful about recommending anything out of the district. And I know I'm speaking to the choir here. A lot of it's out of your concern. It's based upon the IEP team and how that works. I know exactly how it works, but it's still, I think it's a philosophy of least restrictive environment, doing everything we can to establish capacity for programming within the district where we can. And so if we see a population of students who could possibly come back and be provided services, by hiring a staff member and providing services on site, I think that should be always be a consideration, especially when the numbers reach a certain threshold. And I know you're fully aware of that too. I'm not saying anything that you
sure. And I know we've taken steps to bring back our highly cost, if you want to student populations, and we brought teachers in to do that. And I know the department has been looking with Mrs. Guydish about where these numbers are and what caused it. So we'll certainly come to the board once we get more information as to why the numbers are. And again, my understanding is a good number of these students are moving students. And that is something that is out of our control, but we'll certainly have more tight information for the board.
I mean, ultimately, with moving students, you still have control. I mean, you're the LEA, you're the ones that make the recommended program assignment. They can come back to the district if that's our preference, I think. So, I mean, I think we just have to be careful. I'm not saying we're not doing the right thing. We may have had a string of bad luck, but I think too many times it's one of those situations where we are somewhat complicit because we're not, I think, working hard enough to try to find ways to accommodate students within our own programs.
We'll have that meeting.
Can I piggyback on Pat's question? Does our percentage of special education students fit with a state average? Or are we above?
We're about 18% from what I understand, Jerry, and I think probably high 17% are average when you look at Penn data.
Slightly so.
And you asked for a consensus from the board if we can move on with a preliminary budget. What would that be, in February, and not pass a resolution in January?
Right.
So I'm comfortable with that. So I don't know how the rest of us.
As am I.
Okay. And thank you. And finally, January 15th, PFM, Jamie Schlesinger would like to update the board on a refunding opportunity. We talked about it at a previous business function committee meeting. Rates have gone down for bonds, so spend a little time, you can talk about the opportunity and what it would look like. Thank you.
I also think that we should consider more preschool for our students, because a lot of times what happens, we have children that live in poverty and they don't get the resources for their parents. The parents are just barely making it and working maybe 2 jobs and everything else to make ends meet. And the kids do not get the opportunities to visit different things, like go to the library, go to zoos, go see plays, go see this, and that kids that have parents that have those resources. So I think that preschool is extremely important to close the opportunity gap for the children that maybe just stay at home and don't have parents that can take them to libraries and don't have cars and all that stuff. And if we would, I don't know if we can get more kids to come. I know I've seen what they've done in Wharton Creek with the two classes that they've had, and how fantastically well these kids have been performing. They have 15 kids in the class. They have a teacher plus an aide. I mean, it's amazing what goes on there in that classroom. But we need to do that so that these kids don't fall through the cracks when they're in elementary school, and then somehow get labeled, that they're falling behind and they need special services, and they get into that trap. And I don't know what we can do, but to me that would save a lot of money down the line if we could keep these kids, focused and learning and not falling through the cracks in the early years of like kindergarten or preschool to 3rd grade, and keep the numbers low in those areas too, because that's really important. I mean, I taught 2nd grade. I know I saw kids that were, I only had 17 kids, and I know what you can do when you have 17 kids. But when you have 27 kids, that's a different story. When you're, the one big light bulb in the classroom. So, we need to do something. We can't keep on. I know we said we get kids coming in special ed, but I'm sure their kids get also, coming in from into Exeter and also get labeled special ed because they fall through the cracks. I mean, I don't know what anybody else thinks about it, but that's how I feel about it.
I think a lot of the ones that, the special education students that I was referencing are the ones that have extreme needs. I mean, these are kids who probably would not be responsive to early intervention programs to the point where they would be able to be integrated in regular education. When we place a kid outside of the school district, their needs are so extreme that they can't be accommodated through the conventional array of services that we have here in the district. But I hear what you're saying about, those kids who are culturally deprived, economically, deprived, students who need the opportunities, and I think that's the purpose of the allotment program, is to really kind of identify as many of those kids as possible. And I think we've taken every opportunity to take advantage of those programs, which are not run by the district, but are run by the intermediate unit.
And Senator Brown, Senator Brown, who's a huge proponent of the preschool, who got us that 2nd class. I did speak to him again about the possibility of more funding for that. So we'll do what we can to bring more of those classes. But again, we're not the only district looking for that money, but we'll do what we can. I understand what you're saying, and you're true.
I mean, there are schools down south. I was amazed that preschool is, in there for everybody. I was amazed that they're doing that down in the south, and we're not, we're not doing it up here in the north.
Yeah, I mean, some in some areas, programming for 4th graders is part of the array of school programs that are offered, for students. But ours, obviously starts at 5 years. So we rely upon those kids who qualify as disabled through early intervention, or the other governmental, supported programs, for our pre-5 population. So we don't operate a preschool program, and we also depend upon the community, to extend those opportunities for kids where parents can afford them.
I think probably that the teachers can tell, you know, which students, you know, that their parents were capable of, you know, giving them like preschool for 3 days a week or something like that. They can tell that who those kids are when they come into their classroom, you know, in kindergarten, because they're so much more, you know, aware of their numbers and their letters, and some of them are reading and you know, and everything else. So it is so important, you know, especially where children have been deprived of that, you know, to try to get them to close that opportunity gap for them and be successful in kindergarten through, you know, their early grades. Because that's the basis for, you know, like the kids go to school and there are 27 kids, 28 kids, and they get, you know, they get shuffled through. Next thing you know, they either hate school, or they don't like school, or they don't want to come to school. And then the next thing you know, they're saying, you know, they're repeating. And then the next thing you know, somebody's saying, well, gee, maybe you have a learning disability, and it just goes on and on and on. It never seems to get rectified. So I'm very concerned about the early grades and you know, what the school is able to do for those children at that level.
Pat, look through your email. This morning I sent an article through that has a link to a Harvard study about earlier education and outcomes that they found.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Okay, so we're going to move along in the agenda. We've got 3 sets of board minutes that we'll be approving next week. One is the board reorganization meeting minutes, so please review those. The board workshop minutes of December 4th, and then the board voting meetings of minutes of December 18th. In terms of policies, again, several policies are on the agenda. You know, I'm not going to go through the second reading policies. These have already been reviewed at prior workshops and board meetings. But let's maybe start to look a little bit at the first reading policies that begin at the bottom of page 14, item H. Family and medical leave policy has been revised. And in this particular case, what they've done is they've added some language to make it in compliance with law and policy. They've added some qualifying contingencies for armed forces in accordance with the law. And then what we're doing is, you'll see later on in the agenda, we're eliminating a policy 335.1, which is specifically related to military personnel. So we're not changing anything in regard to some of the provisions that are available to family members of those folks who are in the service and who are affected by their health needs because of their involvement in the service. But we're incorporating that into 335 as part of our policy change. And again, we're deleting, as we go here, we're deleting 445 and 545 ultimately, because we're eliminating the whole 400 section and the whole 500 section, which previously had been separated out for professional employees and support personnel. And we're making all of our personnel policies into one specific area. So remember, all the 400s and 500s are going to disappear with the new policy revision. Policy 336 is personal necessity leave. That's item I in your agenda, and they're just we made some minor content updates for clarity purposes, and deleted some language that had to do with the observance of religious holidays. 337 was first reading for vacation. Again, minor content updates for clarity purposes. Sabbatical leave, there are 2 sabbatical leave policies here, 338 and 338.1. 338 has to do with sabbatical leave for medical purposes, and 338.1 has to do for sabbaticals that are taken for professional leave. And there's not a whole lot change in that, although there's just been some updates for consistency with the school code in both of those languages, in both of those policies. 339 is uncompensated leave. That's item M on the board agenda. And we've done some updates for clarity, added some language on leave being provided in accordance with an administrative compensation plan, CBA, a collective bargaining agreement, or an individual contract, which needs to be added to the language of this policy, but otherwise no major changes to that policy. And 340 has to do with responsibility for students' welfare, and this was revised to, and where we deleted some guidelines for minimizing the occurrence of situations where staff members may incur some liability because the language is more procedural than it needed to be, so we're going to move that to an administrative regulation. So I mean, that's the essence of the changes in these policies. I don't know if folks have had a chance to look at them, have any comments. I know, Hunter, you had a few comments as you went through, I think maybe related to vacation, which we can talk about if you'd like to, but maybe we resolved your questions, as we had some previous dialogue on that.
Well, the only two questions that I had remaining, the first one related to, I think it was 336 through 339. There's reference to board resolutions, and I'm not sure if we got, this is funny, but a resolution on that. In the policies with the reference to resolutions, it kind of talks about a body of work that has a legal meaning when it comes to board resolutions. But I think from one of your earlier emails, Dave, it kind of seemed to me that these decisions were something that could be on an agenda and decided on an up and down vote rather than preparation of a resolution and maintenance of the resolution and records.
I mean, that's an excellent clarification. I think you just said it right there. It is an opportunity for the district to, let's say, go beyond an individual contract or collective bargaining agreement to make an exception based upon the board's decision, where a vote would be taken at a board meeting. We've done that before, I mean, obviously. So I'm not aware, unless, Ann, you're aware of any time where we've taken a resolution per se and named it as a resolution. Yeah, I think it's just, it's language. It might be just some minimally confusing language.
Well, I guess my preference would be to change that to something like board action, because I think when you use the word resolution, it means something different. Maybe it means something different in the context that we're thinking about it, but in the actual word resolution, I think when it revolves around some of our work, there are other policies probably that use the word resolution in the very formal sense of, here is a separate piece of paper, 2019 dash whatever number resolution. So that,
I don't think that, I mean, if we're doing that for clarity purposes, I don't think that's a bad idea. And how about if we, run that past the solicitor and see if that sounds okay? To me, it doesn't sound like it'd be a problem.
The only other thing that I had, I think maybe Dave, you and I had some disagreement about how we read this, and I was trying to better understand where you were coming from about this. And under 337, which deals with vacation, when I was reading through this, the second paragraph really struck me as more of a value statement rather than equipping or a purpose statement, rather than giving the policy actual direction about how vacations are scheduled. To me, it really read like the purpose of vacation days. Well, the purpose of the district giving vacation days is for the convenience and at the employee's request, which to me read, we're going to give employees as many vacation days as we possibly can, as long as it doesn't affect negatively the district's management and operational needs. And I get that from the first sentence where it says the board shall provide. So this is talking about the provision of the vacation days, not the scheduling, because the scheduling is dealt with elsewhere. So my preference was still to eliminate that paragraph. I don't think it adds or takes away from anything that's already there. And the citation is more of an underlying citation to the board's authority to grant vacation days rather than that specific paragraph.
Well, here's why I think it's an important paragraph, because while they are entitled to vacation days, they're not entitled to vacation days on any day that they want, let's say. And I think that's what this provision is really intended to kind of identify. So we provide them with the vacation days, and we try whatever we can to accommodate their request, but it has to be something that is not inconveniencing the district. I made the example of somebody who's responsible for registering new students at the beginning of the school year, and they want to take their vacation the last 3 weeks of August. Probably not the best time for a registrar to be taking vacation. But if we didn't have that language in there, someone might say, oh yeah, I can take, there's nothing in policy that says there's any restriction on when I can take my days. I want to take my days when I want to take, when they're convenient for me. So I see it more, maybe we could revise the wording, but the intent that I read into that is that the district ultimately has some level of control over when the person is allowed to actually take the vacation days that they're requesting. Not that we're denying them those vacation days, it's just when they take those.
So I think,
and this really only applies to professional, on these 12-month employees, and I think we do that. I mean, this is nothing that doesn't happen right now. I mean, everybody who works here, every one of our administrators here understands that, there are times when vacations are can be taken, and times when you shouldn't take a vacation. You don't take a vacation the very first day of school if you're a high school principal.
Yeah. So I guess,
right, Tom?
Mr. Campbell.
Whatever you say.
if
Well,
there
wants to change it, I mean.
If there is some way to revise, I think really my hang up came with the word provide, because to me that really sounds like this is the amount of days that we provide. Because it talks later and I see your point about where it doesn't talk about the employee's convenience, because that's true. Now that I look back at it twice in here, you say that. Nowhere else in the policy does it say anything regarding the employee's convenience or their request. So my real concern is with the provide word, because I think that cuts into a value statement as in this is what we provide to employees. And I think when we're talking about how employees are going to take their days, they're going to take what is given to them. And I don't think we're setting that here. And my mind probably works different than some other people's.
Maybe we can continue this conversation. Because we have this is first reading, and so I think we can think through it some more. Maybe some other folks will have some thoughts on it. I don't see any immediate remedy to that, but again, this may be something else that we can tweak a little bit with the solicitor, and if we can move or modify a word, I don't see the problem.
I just have one question about the sabbaticals, and they said for professional development. Is that strictly just like getting courses from colleges, or what else is professional?
The majority of the reason, yes.
I mean, they can't just go out and, like, say I'm going to a school district and watching what they're doing here in curriculum or something rather, and say that was a.
I mean, you think about a sabbatical and the way they used to be at one time. You could take a sabbatical travel. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody take a travel sabbatical. I think the law's been amended to eliminate the travel part of it.
Travel and recreation health.
And I think it has to be something that.
I mean, not travel, but study and recreation.
Well, the request has to be something that the district, I think values and feels is going to be the betterment of the employee and to the district, because the district will be paying, essentially half of that person's salary for the period of time they're on that sabbatical, and they can accept or they can refuse it, or they can modify the length of a sabbatical based upon the recommendations from administration. So
also, though, if there are requirements of credits, so they have to, I'm looking right now, it says they have to have at least 9 graduate credits or 12 undergraduates, so they wouldn't be
for a
able
semester.
to take a professional development somewhere.
Well, I'm just asking what professional development meant. I mean, if that was just taking courses?
Oh, but wait, it says 180 hours, so they could do that?
this is part of state code. school code. So, if whatever provisions are in there, they could do that, again, subject to approval. So, I mean, it could be denied, but there's a window of opportunity here where a person could apply for it, and a process that we have in place, that we're required to put in place.
So I had two questions. One on 338 sabbatical leave. In the second paragraph, the last part of the sentence, and for other purposes at the discretion of the board. Is that too vague? Because the thought occurred to me that if, like, we approved somebody for a sabbatical, whatever their reason, then in 6 years there's a different board, and they deny under the same request, does that present a problem because this is too vague, and do we need to narrow it?
Well, again, a lot of these, I don't want to speak for Dr. Hemberger, but a lot of these policies are written on purposely vague.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't get into listing 8 million reasons why. I don't know if I spoke there, but.
Yeah, I mean, it allows the board to have a little leeway and opportunity to kind of interpret what that might be in the value to the district. So, it also may be, I see a hyperlink next to that to the code, and it may be consistent with the language of the code. That particular language was added, Gary. You can see it's in dark print.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that means that was intentionally added for some reason to provide, to bring to our attention the fact that it was changed.
Right. I don't know, it struck me as odd that it was so vague.
I just can't imagine that we would want to get into a situation where we're just enumerating every possible situation where we may extend, a sabbatical for purposes that might go over and beyond, let's say, health.
Because from one board or one administration, whatever, to the next, the needs could change. Would that also be?
Yeah, and variables, things, including these change. And,
Okay, so 339, it mentions uncompensated leave. Does uncompensated mean only salary? So in other words, are we paying benefits through it, or are we paying pension through it?
Uncompensated leave, that typically occurs when someone is not in a position to be eligible for benefits, compensation, any kind of compensation, whether it's wages or benefits. They are out of every possible paid time off or compensation.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we've had, I don't know, have we done this before? I mean, the classroom occupational exchange leave, have we ever done anything like that before?
No, that's no recollection.
So it doesn't look like we would be invoking this policy too frequently.
Okay.
Any other policy related questions? If not, we'll move on to, thank you. We'll move on to business functions, and Mr. Gillen, you want to walk us through that?
Thanks, Dr. Hemberger. Next week we'll be voting on contracts for purchase through the joint purchasing board on fuel. Assessment appeal of Exeter Commons. St. Lawrence Borough School real estate taxes declared delinquent. Same for Exeter. We'll be voting on the audit report for the calendar year ending December 31, 2017, and budget transfers. And Ann, what was the extra thing? School buses.
We're still evaluating the specifications, some questions for our solicitor.
Right.
So that may be
And with the purchase of not propane, but what's the other? Diesel. What is the cost? What is the cost of that versus the same amount of gallons, with propane? Like what would the cost of the
Well, the diesel is about $1.90 per gallon, and our diesel buses get about 6 to 7 miles per gallon. Propane, based on what Rhodes Energy, when they met with us back in the summertime, were saying propane was $1.15 a gallon, but propane gets about 4.5 miles per gallon. So.
Well, I thought it was the same.
No, it's less miles per gallon, propane compared to diesel. Diesel, it's more miles per gallon.
So it's kind of a trade-off, huh?
Right, propane, the cost, this is an average, we may travel, 530,000 miles a year, so propane might cost a little less, but it is. It's an estimate.
So it's like
$20,000 to $30,000 less per pane, but that's based on the $1.15, and I don't know if that's a good number or not. What Jennifer Goldstein shared.
And I remember when they said in the wintertime the diesel engines need about 40 minutes or so to warm up and for them to get going. So that means somebody's getting paid, the driver's getting paid for that 40 minutes to be sitting there and getting on the bus. How many more
The routes are rated based upon the distance that they have to travel, and Rick, it doesn't, or Ben, how long does it take to heat up a bus? The diesel.
Depends on temperature, but when it's real cold, you probably about 15 minutes. It depends what kind of heat you want in it. Have the engine warm enough just to go out and operate, or you want a warm bus. But we don't leave with a warm bus.
And that's not included in what their rate, the rating?
No. That has no impact on the road.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gillow. We're going to move on to the personnel.
Actually, Dr. Hemberg, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have a question?
Yeah, about the assessment appeal with Exeter Commons. It says that in the appeal, the reduction in assessed value is effective 7/1/2018, and a refund in the amount of $116,000 and change will be issued. We can go back to September 2017. Mr. Japina made a motion to give due to a $900,000 finding in the budget over the summer, Mr. Japina made an amendment to send a check for $157.89 to every household. Now, you referred that to the solicitor, and in October, Sean Lokinger explained that the district is only allowed to make one tax levy per year. Levy. I have a friend named Rick Levy. One tax levy per year, and while a refund is not a tax levy, it affects the one levy that has been made. So, how can we not send a check to a household, because there's no provision in the school code for it, but we can give to a business?
Right, this is an appeal that's, could have gone through court, but definitely it was going through the settlement process with the judge, and that's how it works. And is that interpretation there, I would have to ask either Ellis or Sharon Montaigne how they differ, but this is an actual appeal that's
Settled. This is a settlement.
Is settled.
Okay, I understand, but when our solicitor says that refunds can't be given,
They can't be given. But when you have a settlement with someone, that's not a refund, that's a settlement.
we're still talking about a tax levy though.
But we're not reducing the tax levy, we're reducing the assessment. The levy's the same. But in that situation, 2017, it was really about reducing, I think the suggestion was the levy. So I think they're two different things,
We can
but
certainly
I can get
people.
clarification on that.
Regarding the settlement agreement, if we wanted to know why the settlement agreement was for that amount, would that be a conversation for executive session, or would that be a public conversation?
We talked about it in executive session, and I did inform you of the amount. And, we had a review by our appraiser, and we feel that it was a fair settlement. Remember, when we did a reverse appeal, when the property sold, the Board of Assessment increased the assessed value based upon the sale price. And in speaking with our appraiser, Doug Herring, we knew that they would appeal. And through the appeal process, appraisals were done and determined that what is the true market value. So based upon the work that has been done, this market value, which I shared with the board, is indicative. And this is 3 parcels. It was the Lowe's parcel, the Sonic pad along there, and the Giant and Staples. That based upon their sales, the leases, this is a good market value.
Well, I apologize, I don't recall that, so that's probably on.
Well, actually, you left the room, but I did call you subsequently.
Okay. Well, I apologize for that.
That's okay.
Call.
So we'll get that information to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that all, Mr. Governor?
That's it, thank you.
Okay.
For now.
All right, Personnel Committee, Mr. DePino.
So on personnel, on the agenda for this evening are several retirements, resignations, appointments, change of status, leaves of absence, and course requests, and staff conferences.
Any questions? Thanks, Mr. DePino. Student functions, Mrs. Stroud.
Next week we'll be reporting on field trips that have occurred or are occurring within a 60-mile radius, as well as voting on field trips beyond a 60-mile radius, and then the 2019-2020 school year calendar.
This is a question for Mr. Wegman. Some of these trips, it says they will not be using school buses. So are we going to be farming that out to some private, like roads or someone, or what?
Yeah, some of them, they get contractors. If they're leaving while we're doing our morning routes, or if they're getting back later than when we do our afternoon routes, and they need multiple buses, then they have to get someone else to do that. Right now, we're at a point, we did get some more licensed drivers, and I'm comfortable with sending one bus, what we call an extended day trip. But we haven't got to the point yet where I can furnish 2, 3, or 4 drivers to do something like that.
And just for the board's information, can you let us know then, like, what it costs you when you use our in-house bus as compared to when you then have to farm it out? Can you let us know that?
I have no idea.
We can get
what
that
it costs.
information now. We'll get that information.
Because I think it's very important for the board members to know that it is costly when we have to outsource our buses.
We'll have that information for you.
Thank you.
I had a question about student functions concerning the changes made to the Soaring Eagle. These are really minor things.
That's curriculum, Mr. Gallop. That's the next.
She didn't mention that.
We didn't get
You're jumping ahead. That's number 9.
Then I'll wait. I got ahead. Trying to move it along, guys.
Any other comments or questions about the student function section?
I just wanted to say that I appreciate the effort that was put in to decrease the number of early dismissals on Fridays. I know that Dr. Phillips and anyone that was involved listened to the community when they mentioned their concerns on that, and I appreciate that, so thank you.
Yeah, it's also my understanding that we have, I think, an agreement with the ETA that this is a...
We have, as we did last year, we have spoken to the sports staff union, the teachers union. We shared it with the administrative group, and we shared it with the board. And at this point, that was the only comment, from the board. The other groups have all given their blessing, if you will. So I would not expect what happened last year to happen this year. But you never say never.
Okay, the next section is curriculum committee, and Mrs. Hacker's not here. Dr. McClendon, did you want to take this over, or should I turn this over to Dr. Winters?
Fine.
Okay. You want to walk us through this section here,
Sure.
Dr. Winters?
Am I good vocally, or do I need to stand up and use the microphone?
What'd you say?
I think you're good.
How do I know I was walking into that? So there are 3 items that are up for vote next week under curriculum. The first 2 are the Soaring Eagle documents, one for the junior high and one for the senior high. There is under each agenda item, in addition to the full document, there's a 1 or 2 pager that identifies the changes. For the junior high, the changes are very minimal. Really, the only one that is somewhat substantive has to do with the shift from Read 180 to SRA Flex as one of our literacy programs to serve some of our students with reading needs. That's really the only substantive change for the junior high. For the senior high, there are some courses that are being added and some courses that are being taken out due to in enrollments and numbers and where there's been interest or not interest. I'd say the most substantive change for the senior high document has to do with the shift to the Latin grading system, a movement away from valedictorian and salutatorian, which began in 2017, was my understanding, and then a shift to magna cum laude, I think it's in order, summa cum laude, magna cum laude, cum laude. And it's outlined in the Soaring Eagle document what those percentage reference points are. So questions about the Soaring Eagle documents? I know you had one, Mr. Gallup.
It's not about that. My question really is, are these changes really necessary to be brought to the board? Can't we leave this in the hands of administration to take care of? Because we're talking about we changed a word, foreign to world languages, and on page 5 of the junior high, removed the sentence beginning with the words Project Read, and as you mentioned, changed Read 180 to SRA Flex. Can't we just let administration take care of stuff like that?
Yeah, and I think we do. It's just that I think within our board policy and our requirement as a board annually, we're supposed to approve the program of studies. Whether there's any change in it or not, there could be no change, but I think we would annually be required to approve the following year's program of studies. So we're not necessarily, obviously we're approving changes, but we'd be approving the program of studies regardless of whether there are changes or not. And so we're not getting into the nitty-gritty. We're depending upon the administration to tell us really what those changes would be.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're kind of in sync, right?
Yeah. It's just formality for the most part.
The role of management, the administration takes on to put the program together, and in the role of governance, you approve it.
Yeah, we're just simply approving what they are recommending.
But that governance role is more than just saying all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. We have a responsibility to look at this because this is how every taxpayer's dollars is being spent to educate our students, and we have a vested interest in making sure that that's rigorous. And we have great staff and administration, but it's our responsibility to verify that on the governance end.
That's a good point. And we've gone through that. I mean, the curriculum committee, part of the responsibility there is to kind of hear what those changes are, which we have, review the program of studies and make those recommendations to the board. And that's why it's on here today, because we just had a curriculum committee meeting before this meeting, and that's exactly what we went through.
So there you go, Mr. Goff.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know I brought it up other months, but it can go back to stuff that Mike brought up in Personnel Committee, things that have already transpired. Change of status, and there was another one for, this one was under student functions, like the senior high school going to Boyertown High School on January 9th. Isn't that stuff that administration can just take care of or not? Aren't we walking a long way to get that done?
It's just it's a report. I don't know whether we have a legal responsibility to receive that report or not. It's what we've done, what we've always done. So you're questioning something we've always done. Okay.
How dare I?
Yeah. How dare you? No, I mean that's a good question. I mean, is it necessary for us to get a monthly report on school trips that are less than 60 miles, from the school? It's a valid question.
At one point, we did take action, but then we didn't bring it back to just a report. So, I mean, there's progress there.
Okay.
And then the third item under curriculum has to do with approval of a new Spanish 1 and Spanish 2 textbook for the 1920 school year. Within that agenda item as an attachment, there is the price quote from the company that outlines the cost, as well as the vetting tool that was used by our World Languages Department to go ahead and determine which series they were going to go with. I can tell you that even though the series that they want to purchase is the newer edition of the one that we're currently using, they took 3 different textbook series through a vetting process and came to the conclusion on this particular one because of its alignment to the standards and the resources that it provides teachers, and the fact that there's a really effective digital bundle that brings a 5-year digital license with the books, so that students can have textbooks on their Chromebooks to use from home, etc.
That sounds thorough.
Any questions about any of those 3 items?
I just want to reflect to the rest of the board the comments that I made in the curriculum committee and the changes that I asked for. I don't know if I'll get them, probably not. We'll see. But for the Latin system, the ranking from cum laude up to summa cum laude I felt was too high. Currently, summa cum laude is if you achieve a grade point average of 4.0 or 100% in our ranking. Magna cum laude 97.5 and cum laude 95%. I felt that to make it more reflective of all of the students, not just the students who take weighted classes, it should be lowered to 92% with intervals going up. Currently in our grade book, per the Soaring Eagle, if you receive an A in a class, you're at 92%. If you're good enough to get an A, I think you should be able to get highest honors or honors. I think cum laude means graduated with honors, and so on and so forth. And I think that raising the standard to you must achieve perfection to receive the highest honors, I think doesn't reflect well on all the students who do a lot of good work in academic courses, not weighted courses. And I think that this would probably be, in my opinion, more reflective of how we want to be inclusive, but also want to expect rigor. Because an A is an A, no matter if it's 92% in my opinion, or if it's 95%. And I think that that deserves credit where credit is due. In addition to that, in our weighted averages right now, AP courses where you don't take the test is weighted at 1.05, but if you take the test, it's 1.1. The kicker is that to get that 1.1 designation, you just have to take the test. All you're doing is paying to take the test. The grade you receive back on your AP examination does not influence your class weight being increased. And I think that should be changed. I think it should remain, if you take an AP class, you're automatically getting the weighted average as long as you pass the class of 1.1. And it shouldn't matter on whether or not you take your test at the end of the course. So
was a response given on that?
Sort of. For your input?
Yeah.
Yeah, that response.
Well, can I just react to one part of it, because I don't necessarily disagree with your AP issue, and I think that may be something to look into. But you know, the part about, you know, the issue about the Latin system and the way it's constructed currently, what I particularly liked what Mr. Campbell talked about was that, you know, we're looking at approximately 20% of our population who will be within the honors category. And what I saw was that, you know, they recognize there could be something like grade inflation, you know, where we have so many kids who perform at that level, but you have to make some distinctions within the higher range. And unless you want 50% of your population to fall within the honors category, you want to try to keep it probably a little more, let's say, elusive. So what I heard was that, you know, they took that 19 to 20% of the population that they felt were in the honors range, and they split that essentially into thirds to be able to kind of identify a population of students who would qualify for, you know, those honors. So to me, it was how they calculated it, and I don't know if you did it that way, Tom, but I mean, sort of backwards, you know, from the number of students who you would like to have within the honors category. Does that make sense?
It does try to strike that balance between we're going from a system where we're honoring 2 people to a system where we're honoring about 60. So we're trying to increase the inclusiveness through that, while at the same time balancing that against, this is an honor. It is something that reflects 4 years of consistent work by many of our kids, but not all. And it is that balance. So I understand your point, and in researching it from what others, there's not a lot of other schools that have data that we can look at. There's some schools are shifting toward this to get away from the race with class rank, but among colleges who all do this, they're all over the board in terms of where their breakdowns are, everywhere from 50% that I saw down to 15%.
You know, and I think, you know, I would add, as far as the AP piece, you know, I don't know that you know, or I would contend that thing alone shouldn't, you know, cause us to not approve the Soaring Eagle document. But, you know, I think that, you know, moving forward, I think it's an opportunity that at the high school level for Mr. Campbell, as he's interacting with the department chairs, talking with our teachers that have taught AP and have been teaching it for a number of years, maybe better wrap our heads around what the rationale was when that original decision was made, and, you know, have some dialogue, and maybe there's an opportunity moving forward to take a look at that. So, you know, I think it's good that it was, you know, brought to our attention, and you know, there's an opportunity moving forward where, like I said, administration in conjunction with department chairs can take a look at that and try to wrap our head around why we set it up that way.
And as we spoke, none of us were here when this has been in place, so we've got to get to the root.
I was.
Wow. We'll include your input.
Thank you for your input.
I appreciate what's been said about the Latin system structure, and I think, you know, I appreciate that we want to make sure that it is a high margin, and 20% I think is a good inclusion number, but I think that shouldn't be our target. Our target should be what is best to reflect that you have demonstrated rigor while also giving grace and room for you to fail for the right reasons. And when I say fail, I mean not get 92% on a test or something along those lines. But, you know, even our National Honor Society, all you need is a 92% average to get into the National Honor Society. And if students in the National Honor Society could, in theory, not receive designation when they're graduating, I mean, to me that seems, you know, something going on there where the standard that the National Honor Society at 92% is incorrect is our standard that we have at an A not high enough. You know, an A versus an A plus to me is not a difference, and it's not in college either.
In all due respect, I mean, when you say that National Honor Society students would not qualify, how many of them didn't qualify when we were looking for 2 students in valedictorian and salutatorian?
I don't disagree. I think this is a great change, and I'll tell you that I was part of the first conversation that this happened with in 2014 or 13 when it came to the board, and the board was not interested at the time. Well, I don't know if they weren't interested. I don't want to say that.
They weren't interested.
They did not take action on it at the time.
I'd also like to say National Honor Society isn't just the grade point average. It's just not. It's not
Sure.
just based on grades. So I mean, you can have a 98% grade average and not qualify for because of other factors. I would say.
I wanted to say, I think it's important that we continue to encourage our students to take the AP classes and also the AP exam. And, I think you mentioned that you chose not to get credit, but they can get college credits for that and get a head start in, college and save money. And the other thing was mentioned in our meeting about colleges are looking for what kind of course. You got an A in one kind of course, you got an A in an AP class. So colleges do look at that, so I think that is important. I'm glad to see that is part of, criteria for determining who's going to get these honors.
Yes, I agree very much with you. I can attest to one of my grandchildren. He had like 3/4 of a year in because of all the AP courses he had gotten and the grades that he got them on them. I mean, you have to have a certain grade. I think it must be 3 and above, isn't it, for it to take credit?
It depends. It's usually 3 and above, but some colleges will only take 4 and 5.
I think so. I think state colleges take 3 and above, and I think that maybe the private colleges take 4 and 5. Well, he got them. I know that he's like way ahead of the game. Like 3/4 of a semester a year he got from his AP courses.
Right. I think if a student is capable, we do want to encourage them to take the most rigorous courses that they can and be successful.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Winters. That's the end of our agenda. Are there any other board members who'd like to be heard at this time?
Dave, I'd just like to ask if we could have an executive session before the start of next. Give me a second, Pam.
Not tonight.
Give me a second, Pam. Give me a second.
Tonight we get done early.
Prior to our next board meeting, to just discuss the transition for Jasmine's role and the process we're going to go through.
Okay, and
I don't even know if that needs executive session.
well, I mean, I don't have a problem just making a few comments about that right now because I have had a chance to review, our policy and the protocol for new board members with Ellis Katz, earlier today, and I know Ann's been through the process too as board secretary in helping us advertise and organize and schedule interviews for candidates, but essentially we have 30 days to fill the vacancy. Once we approve the resignation, which will be next Tuesday, we've got 30 days to fill the vacancy, and I would imagine we would immediately send out some notice to the community. Yeah, right after. Yep. And
Right,
then,
so why do we need an executive session?
don't know.
Because there is a.
We just
wanted to-
just in case.
yeah, well, I think this is something I actually wanted to say anyway, was to make sure that the public was aware that, the vacancy exists and that there will be an interview process with the board, and the majority of the board would have to vote on a candidate who would then fulfill the remainder of the term for Mrs. Hacker.
It is an open session during the interview process.
I'm assuming,
That was in the policy.
yeah, that's,
So it would be done in-
I don't know whether the interview was open session, but the vote is open.
The interview as well.
Was it?
Yeah.
Was it? Okay.
As
I recall from last
Yes.
Would the appointment run until the next municipal election being this year, or would it be?
Until
No, it's
they would complete the term.
Fill the duration of Mrs. Hacker's term. I think it was 2 years. Yeah, because this was just the first year.
I just wanted, do we know how many, this is about the bus drivers, do we know how many bus drivers are, Exeter residents? Or could we get that information?
I can tell you, the last time I asked for that, which was 2 years ago, it was about 65%.
Is that still, do you know?
I don't know exactly, but the vast majority are. The vast majority do live in Exeter. Not all of them, but the vast majority do.
Yeah. Is there, like, can we get, is there?
Yes, we'll get that
Okay,
updated.
all right, thank you.
Well, I want to thank the board. It's only 10 of 9.
Oh, wait, I wanted to get into something else. Okay, we're recessed, thank you.